He left the safe open. It wasn't an accident, it was a test. Charles believed that money could buy everything except trust. He thought she would take the money the moment no one was watching. But what Maria did instead, he never saw coming. That simple choice would shake everything Charles thought he knew about honesty, loyalty, and the real meaning of wealth. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the quietest actions, and this was one of those rare moments. Charles had it all. A million-dollar business empire, a sprawling mansion nestled in the hills, and a team of staff to handle the things he never had time for. Yet, despite all his success, there was one thing missing: trust. Especially when it came to the people who walked through his front door every day. When Maria, a quiet single mom with tired eyes but steady hands, joined as his new maid, Charles didn't see a person. He saw a risk to his wealth, his peace of mind, his carefully guarded life. So, one morning, driven by suspicion and doubt, Charles made a choice. He left the safe open, a silent invitation to test Maria's honesty. What happened next would reveal far more than just whether money could be stolen. It would reveal the true value of integrity. Charles unlocked the safe, but this time he didn't do it to take anything out. He just left it cracked open, enough to be noticed, but subtle enough to feel accidental. Inside, there were thick stacks of crisp bills, old coins worth more than gold, a diamond necklace his grandmother once wore, untouched for years. The room was silent, but not empty. A tiny camera blinked red in the corner. This wasn't about money. It was about character and trust. Charles had everything except peace of mind. People think when you're a millionaire, you stop worrying. But that's not how it works. Money changes the questions, not the stress. Charles didn't care about losing a few hundred or even 1,000. What he feared losing was dignity, his and others. What do people do when they think no one's watching? That's where the truth lives. He'd seen too many people fold when temptation knocked. This test wasn't cruel. It was clarity. The room where the safe sat wasn't even supposed to draw attention. It had no paintings, no grand furniture. Just a desk, some papers, and now this silent invitation. To anyone walking by, it would seem like a careless mistake. But for someone who notices, who pays attention, it becomes something else entirely. A crossroad. A whisper of opportunity, and Charles needed to know, who was Maria when no one else was looking? The camera's lens didn't blink. It just waited, like him. What he saw through that small screen wasn't just about a safe or even the maid. It was a reflection of himself, of the doubts he tried to bury. Would he have resisted the same temptation 30 years ago, when he was broke and hungry and sleeping in his car? That safe was more than a test. It was a time machine. Back when he was starting out, Charles sold used phones out of a van. He still remembered the night someone forgot a stack of bills in the back seat. He returned it the next morning, scared, sweating, but clean. The man had said, "You'll be rich someday," not because you returned it, but because you didn't even hesitate. Charles never forgot. That moment shaped him. Now he wondered, would Maria get her moment? Maria didn't know the camera was there. She didn't know she was being watched. But Charles wasn't after proof of guilt. He was searching for integrity, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need an audience. The money in the safe was bait, yes, but not for theft. It was bait for truth. If she took something, he'd understand. But if she didn't, maybe he'd understand something even deeper. He left for the day as usual, but his mind stayed behind. Replay after replay ran through his head. Would she glance inside? Would she hesitate? People underestimate how revealing hesitation is. It's not about taking. It's about considering. And when someone's life is in chaos, even the thought of money can scream louder than a siren. But what would silence look like? He hadn't spoken to Maria much. She was respectful, quiet, invisible by choice. But something about her, the way she folded towels like origami, or lined the sugar packets with military precision, felt intentional. This wasn't someone careless. This was someone aware. If she noticed the safe and didn't act, that would say more than a resume ever could. So Charles waited, not to catch someone, but to witness something. The weight of the unopened safe sat heavier than gold. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about values. Because sometimes you don't really know who someone is until the room is silent, the money is visible, and there's no one else around to judge. That's where real loyalty reveals itself or vanishes. Maria arrived right on the dot every morning. Her steps were quiet but steady, like someone used to walking through rooms where no one really noticed. Her uniform was clean but faded, showing signs of hard work and many washes. She didn't waste time with small talk or idle chatter. She just got to work. But if you looked closely into her eyes, you'd see something deeper. A mix of exhaustion and fierce determination, like someone carrying invisible battles yet refusing to let them show. It was the kind of look that tells stories without words. She passed by the open safe without hesitation. For a heartbeat, she stopped, her gaze lingering longer than expected. It wasn't curiosity that froze her there. It was respect, or maybe something more complicated. She didn't touch a single bill or jewel. Not a finger, not even a glance inside. Just a quiet moment, and then she kept walking, folding clothes with almost ritual precision. That small pause, so easy to miss, said more than she ever would in words. The silence around Maria was not emptiness. It was a language of its own. She didn't need to say much because her work spoke volumes. When you're used to being invisible, the loudest thing you can do is keep showing up, day after day, with honesty. Charles noticed, but it confused him. Why would someone notice the open safe and just walk away? It went against every expectation he had built up in his head. Was she hiding something deeper? Or was he missing a piece of the puzzle? Everyone carries secrets, some visible, some buried deep. Maria's quiet was not a shield to hide behind, but a fortress built from years of hardship. Imagine waking up every morning knowing the world expects less from you, just because of your name or your clothes. Yet, you hold your head high, and you work harder to be seen for your character, not your circumstances. That's what Maria was doing silently, with every sweep of her hand and every folded sheet. Charles found himself watching her more closely than before. It wasn't just about trust or suspicion anymore. It was about understanding. People talk about loyalty and honesty as if they're simple choices. But for some, they are survival skills. Maria's silence wasn't cold or indifferent. It was armor shaped by a life that tested her integrity at every turn. Her eyes held tired stories, but also an unwavering heart that no camera could capture fully. The safe sat open like a test not just of temptation, but of respect. Maria's quiet decision to not even peek inside was a lesson Charles hadn't expected to learn. It reminded him of moments in his own life when he had to choose dignity over desperation. Like the time he paid back a debt he barely could afford, because keeping his integrity meant more than any short-term gain. Maria was living that lesson quietly, every single day. For Charles, the maid who never spoke became a secret mirror, reflecting parts of himself he tried to forget. The idea of loyalty shifted from a business contract to something deeply personal. The kind of loyalty you owe to yourself first, before anyone else. Watching her, he realized trust is fragile and rare. And sometimes, the loudest truth comes wrapped in silence and simple acts. Still, questions lingered. Why didn't she even open the safe once? Just to take a little. Was it pride? Or maybe a secret promise to someone else? Charles knew better than to rush conclusions. People's actions often speak in riddles. His heart urged him to look closer, to learn more. And that was the beginning of a story neither of them saw coming. In the quiet house, with the safe left open and a silent maid moving through the rooms, the tension grew. The test wasn't over. What Maria did next would change everything. Not just for Charles, but for both of them. Sometimes, the biggest surprises come from the least expected places. Charles decided to run the test again. The safe stayed open day after day, like a silent invitation nobody wanted to accept. Maria kept showing up, just as punctual and quiet as before. She moved through the house with a steady rhythm, folding clothes and scrubbing floors like clockwork. But something caught Charles's attention. Each time she passed the room with the safe, her steps slowed ever so slightly, as if she was carrying a secret weight. It was subtle, but it was there. A strange pause that didn't fit with her usual calm. At first, Charles thought maybe she was hiding something. The hesitation nagged at him like a whisper. Was she wrestling with temptation behind those tired eyes? Or maybe she was silently battling a storm that no one else could see. Sometimes people's actions don't match the surface. They are hiding pain, loyalty, or hope beneath. And Maria's strange routine was becoming a mystery he couldn't ignore. That tiny change in her pace felt like a code he was desperate to crack. The safe remained open, untouched, like a challenge hanging in the air. It wasn't just about money anymore. It had turned into a game of trust and silence. Maria didn't speak about it, but Charles felt that unspoken tension pulsing between them. What was she thinking during those moments? Was she guarding a secret? Or was she quietly accepting something bigger than himself? This strange routine was teaching Charles a lesson he hadn't expected to learn. In real life, people often act in ways that confuse others because they're carrying invisible battles. Maybe Maria was holding on to memories, promises, or fears that kept her from even touching what could have changed everything for her. Charles remembered stories of people who, despite their struggles, hold tight to their values like a lifeline. This wasn't just a maid with a job. It was a woman navigating a maze of integrity and survival. The more Charles watched, the more he realized how little he really knew about Maria. Her silence spoke louder than words, and her hesitation told a story that wasn't yet finished. Maybe she was protecting herself from judgment, or maybe she was protecting someone else. A child, a dream, a broken past. The house felt heavier with every day that passed, like the safe held more than just valuables. It held secrets of heart and character. This strange routine between Charles and Maria became a silent dance, a test that neither wanted to fail. It showed him the fine line between suspicion and respect, and how trust can be stretched thin but not easily broken. Sometimes the smallest moments, the pause before a door, the way someone breathes, reveal more than years of conversations. Maria's pace spoke volumes, but Charles was only just beginning to listen. He thought about his own habits when facing temptation or doubt. How often had he slowed down, hesitated, or turned away from something that could hurt or help him? Maria's strange routine was a mirror reflecting his own struggles with trust and loyalty. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, and the strongest hearts beat quietly beneath the surface. As the days passed, Charles knew he had to go deeper. This wasn't a simple case of right or wrong. It was a complex story of human emotion, shaped by pain, pride, and resilience. The strange routine wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a clue, and he was determined to find out what it meant before the story took a turn no one expected. With the safe still open and the mystery growing, Charles braced himself. The next move could change everything. What Maria was hiding or what he was missing would soon come to light, and when it did, there would be no going back. It was a quiet Friday afternoon when Charles got home earlier than usual. The house was empty, no sign of Maria bustling through the rooms, no gentle clatter of her cleaning supplies. Instead, on the kitchen counter, he found a small piece of paper, folded carefully and waiting like a secret message. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Please fix the roof leak in the guest room. Mold is spreading. Just a few simple words, but they carried a weight that hit Charles deeper than any stack of money ever could. That note wasn't just about a leaky roof or some household chore. It was proof that Maria cared, not just about her job, but about the very walls she worked within. She saw beyond her title as maid and took ownership of this space, treating it like it mattered. For someone with so little, she showed respect for what wasn't hers. It was a rare kind of loyalty that money can't buy, and one Charles wasn't expecting. She was leaving him a secret gift of trust. What struck Charles most was how Maria noticed details most people overlook. Mold spreading quietly, a roof that might collapse if ignored. These weren't small things to her. They were urgent calls for attention, not just maintenance. It was as if she was reminding him that the real value of a home lies in care, in responsibility, in the little actions that protect what matters. He thought about how many people in his position might ignore such a note, dismissing it as petty or irrelevant. Her message also stirred a new kind of respect inside Charles. Here was a woman who had nothing in the bank, yet she acted like a guardian of this mansion. It was a lesson in dignity, one that went beyond money or status. Maria's note was a silent declaration that she wasn't just passing through. She was invested in a way Charles hadn't yet understood. Sometimes the most profound trust is shown not in grand gestures, but in small acts of care. Still, the safe remained unmentioned. That open door to temptation sat quietly in the background, untouched, unspoken. It was almost as if Maria was telling Charles without words, "I see the safe, I see your doubt, but I'm here for more than money." That subtle message unsettled Charles more than any act of theft would have. It forced him to question his own assumptions about trust and loyalty, and about the real meaning of honesty. Charles knew he was witnessing something rare. Most people see a maid as just another employee, someone easily replaced. But Maria's note shattered that idea. She wasn't just doing a job. She was building a bridge, brick by brick, with every careful observation and every quiet act of care. That letter was more than a request. It was an invitation to see her true character. And Charles was beginning to accept the invitation. He couldn't help but wonder about her life outside these walls. What had shaped the woman who cared so deeply for a home that wasn't hers? The note made Charles realize that sometimes the most loyal hearts come from the most unexpected places. Maria's quiet courage was growing stronger with every day she walked these floors, unseen but present, unheard but undeniable. That letter also opened a new door for Charles, not just in his mansion, but in his mind. It challenged his suspicion and made space for something new: respect. Could trust be earned through simple acts of responsibility? Could loyalty be measured by concern for a leaking roof rather than a pile of cash? The answers weren't clear yet, but Charles knew he had to keep looking. As the clock ticked and the house remained still, Charles felt a shift inside him. The story wasn't about money or theft anymore. It was about two people quietly testing the limits of trust, honesty, and respect. And in that silent dance, a lesson was waiting, one that neither of them would forget. Charles's curiosity was no longer just a flicker. It had become a flame. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Maria than met the eye. So he decided to dig a little deeper, quietly, carefully. He paid a private investigator to run a background check, not because he suspected anything illegal, but because he needed to understand the woman who had shown him so much honesty. What he found was a story marked by struggle and quiet resilience. There was no criminal record. That fact surprised him, but what truly caught his attention was what the papers revealed. A bankruptcy filing from a few years ago, a painful custody battle over her son, and mounting medical bills that seemed to weigh her down like invisible chains. She was barely holding it together, fighting battles most people wouldn't even notice in passing. And yet, she had never once taken a penny from the open safe. Not even once. Maria's life was a reflection of the silent wars many people fight every day. She was a warrior without armor, navigating the storms of financial ruin and heartbreak with nothing but grit and a strong sense of integrity. Charles thought about how easy it would have been for her to slip into desperation. The temptation was real, but so was her loyalty. It wasn't about the money, at least not in the way he had imagined. This revelation flipped Charles's perspective. He realized that trust and honesty weren't just about wealth or status. They were about character, tested by hardship. Maria wasn't a thief waiting for a chance. She was someone who clung fiercely to her values, even when everything else was falling apart. It was a powerful lesson. That dignity can survive even when money and fortune don't. Charles thought about his own life and the second chances he'd been given. He knew firsthand that people's pasts don't define their worth. But seeing Maria's struggles laid bare made him appreciate her even more. How many people in her shoes would have chosen a different path, one of easy money over hard work? Her refusal to touch the safe was more than loyalty. It was a testament to her heart. He imagined the weight Maria carried every day, bills piling up, the constant worry over her son's future, and the crushing feeling of barely making it through each month. That $1,000 in the safe might have seemed like salvation to anyone else, but to her, it was a test of something much deeper. How do you hold on to honesty when life feels like it's closing in on you? Maria's answer was clear, with courage and unwavering integrity. This background check didn't just reveal facts. It revealed a hidden strength. Maria's story wasn't about what she lacked, but what she refused to lose. Her honor, her loyalty, and her sense of right. It was the kind of story that challenges stereotypes and forces you to rethink what true wealth means. Sometimes it isn't in what you have, but in what you refuse to give up. Charles's heart swelled with a mix of admiration and sadness. He realized that sometimes the richest people are the ones who have the least in material things but the most in character. Maria's life was a quiet symphony of struggle and dignity, playing out in the shadows of his mansion. And the question lingered in his mind, why wouldn't she take the money even just once? With this new understanding, Charles knew his test was far from over. There was still so much more to learn, and the next chapter promised to reveal even deeper truths about trust, loyalty, and what it really means to have a second chance. One afternoon, while tidying up the living room, Charles noticed something tucked under the sofa cushions. A small, worn photograph. He picked it up carefully and saw a little boy smiling. His face slightly flushed as if he had just been playing despite his asthma. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, but the message on the back was clear. To Mom, I'm proud of you. It wasn't Charles's photo, but it told a story more powerful than any family album in his mansion. That picture revealed a hidden world, a glimpse into Maria's heart. Here was a mother juggling invisible battles, a sick child, financial struggles, and the weight of responsibility that no paycheck could erase. Charles realized this woman, who never spoke much and moved like a shadow, was carrying a love deeper than gold. The photo was a testament to her sacrifices, and a reminder that real wealth is often invisible to the eye. He thought about what it meant to be proud of someone in such difficult circumstances. That boy's words were simple but profound. They spoke of hope, resilience, and unconditional love. Maria's values shone through in this one small moment, values that no amount of money could buy or replace. It was the kind of dignity that's earned, not given. Charles began to see her not just as a maid, but as a hero in her own right. The photograph was a silent confession of the life Maria led beyond these walls. Every day she faced challenges most people would shy away from. Managing her son's health, balancing bills, and fighting to keep her family together. It was a far cry from the opulence around her. Yet she held onto her integrity with unwavering strength. This little boy, with his asthma and his pride, was her reason to stay honest, no matter what. Charles remembered the lessons his own mother taught him about sacrifice and character. He saw echoes of those lessons in Maria's story, how true love and responsibility demand hard choices, and how sometimes the greatest wealth is found in small, quiet acts of care. That photo was more than a picture. It was a symbol of a mother's devotion and a woman's silent fight to keep her dignity intact. He imagined Maria's daily routine, filled with worry and hope. How many nights did she stay awake, listening for her son's breathing to steady? How many times did she choose to put her family's needs before her own? The photograph spoke volumes without uttering a single word. It was a glimpse into the sacrifices no one saw, but everyone should respect. Charles realized that understanding Maria's world was crucial to understanding her loyalty. This woman had given up so much, yet never compromised her honesty or her heart. It challenged everything he thought he knew about people, trust, and money. The photo was a mirror reflecting what really matters in life. The discovery made Charles pause and reflect deeply. What had Maria sacrificed to remain true? What battles had she fought silently while cleaning his mansion? The answers were still unfolding, but one thing was certain. Her story was far from over, and the lessons were just beginning to reveal themselves. With the photograph in hand, Charles knew the next steps would uncover even more about Maria's journey. What happened next would show him just how far integrity and loyalty can reach, even in the darkest times. At 11:30 p.m., the house was quiet and still, the kind of silence that makes every sound stand out. Charles was upstairs, unaware that Maria had slipped back in. She thought the mansion was empty, that no one was watching. But she had a purpose. She moved with careful steps, heading straight to the safe, the one he'd left open all week as part of his test. Instead of reaching for the money or jewelry, she carried a cloth and a bottle of glass cleaner. She knelt down, wiped the handle slowly, wiping away fingerprints and dust, then turned and left without a word. That late-night visit wasn't what Charles expected. It was neither theft nor curiosity, but something quieter, more profound. Was it respect for the owner's property? A way of saying, "I'm not here to take what isn't mine"? Or was it guilt? A need to erase any trace of her presence near the temptation? The act was small but powerful. An unspoken message that lingered longer than any spoken word. Sometimes, actions like these reveal more about a person's heart than any conversation ever could. Charles watched the security footage with a pounding heart. He rewound the moment several times, trying to understand why she'd come back just to clean the handle. It was like she was trying to protect something, his trust, maybe, or her own integrity. That gesture told him that Maria was wrestling with something deeper than money. It was a reminder that honesty isn't always loud. It can be found in the quietest, most unexpected moments. For a man used to power and control, this simple act was humbling. Charles realized that trust isn't given lightly, especially when the stakes are high. Maria's late-night return showed a level of respect that transcended her role as an employee. It was a gesture of loyalty, a silent vow that she wouldn't betray the faith he was testing. Sometimes, the greatest rewards come not from grand declarations, but from small, consistent choices. This moment also spoke to Charles's own struggles with trust and suspicion. How often had he judged too quickly, assuming the worst about people based on surface impressions? Maria's actions forced him to reconsider what honesty really meant. Was it about what someone takes, or what they choose to leave behind? Her late-night visit blurred the lines between fear, respect, and something even more profound, character. Charles thought about how easy it would have been for Maria to just take what she needed and disappear. Yet, she chose a different path, one that required courage and restraint. In a world where quick gains often overshadow integrity, her choice was a rare gift. It reminded Charles that character is built in moments of temptation, and true loyalty shines brightest when no one is watching. That night, the mansion felt different. A place where two people, separated by class and circumstance, shared a silent understanding. Maria's late-night visit was a turning point, a quiet rebellion against the assumptions and doubts that had filled the air. It was the kind of moment that changes relationships, hearts, and lives. Still, the question remained, why clean the handle? Was it guilt over the temptation, or respect for the trust he had placed in her? Charles didn't have the answer yet, but he knew this act was a key piece of the puzzle. The story was unfolding in ways he never imagined, and the next chapter promised even deeper revelations. With the safe still open and the night growing darker, Charles waited for what would come next. Maria's silent promise hung in the air like a fragile thread, pulling them both toward an unexpected truth. Charles sat alone in his study, eyes fixed on the security footage playing back on the screen. His heart raced with every frame as he watched Maria move through the room. The safe sat open, a silent invitation to anyone who wanted to take what wasn't theirs. But she didn't reach for a single dollar or piece of jewelry. Instead, she just stood there, staring at the stacks of money, the rare coins, the glittering jewels. Then, almost inaudibly, she whispered, "Not mine." That whisper hit Charles harder than any theft would have. In a world where money often talks louder than morals, Maria's refusal spoke volumes. It wasn't just about what she chose not to take. It was about what she chose to honor. He replayed the video 5 times, searching for some hidden sign, some crack in her honesty, but found none. She was steady, true, and unwavering. What kind of person says no when life seems to be handing them everything? This moment challenged everything Charles thought he knew about trust and temptation. In his world, people often take what they want when no one's watching. But Maria's actions proved there's a rare kind of strength that stands firm even when the stakes are high. It was a lesson in integrity that cut deeper than any stack of money ever could. She showed him that respect and loyalty aren't just words. They're choices made in silence. Charles thought about how easy it would have been for her to grab what she needed, just once. A single bill might have eased her struggles, solved a problem, bought a moment of relief. But she didn't. That restraint was more powerful than any confession. It was a quiet rebellion against a world that often rewards dishonesty and punishes truth. Maria's whisper was a declaration of who she was beneath the worn uniform and tired eyes. He felt a surge of admiration mixed with confusion. How could someone so vulnerable hold onto such unshakable honesty? Was it pride, fear, or something deeper? Watching the footage again, Charles realized it wasn't about the money, it was about dignity. Maria was protecting something far more valuable than cash or gold: her character. And that made all the difference. As the video ended, Charles sat back, lost in thought. The safe was still open, the temptation still there, but now it felt different. It wasn't a test of theft anymore. It was a test of belief. Would he believe in the goodness he saw, or would suspicion creep back in? The answer felt heavy, like a choice that could change everything between them. He wondered if he should confront her, ask about that whisper, hear her story firsthand. But maybe some things aren't meant to be spoken out loud right away. Sometimes the most powerful truths reveal themselves in time, through actions and moments like this one. Charles felt a shift inside himself, a willingness to trust where before there was doubt. The question lingered in his mind: what kind of person says no when life says yes? It was a puzzle he was determined to solve. And as he prepared for the next step, Charles knew that whatever happened next, this moment would stay with him forever. A reminder that trust isn't given lightly, but earned in silence. That night, after watching the footage and feeling the weight of Maria's quiet honesty, Charles found himself drifting back into memories of his own childhood. He remembered his mother, a woman of incredible strength who worked 3 jobs just to keep the family afloat. She was the kind of person who carried the world on her shoulders without complaint. Her hands were rough, her heart even stronger, and her voice was filled with wisdom that Charles had tucked away somewhere deep inside him. One phrase she said often echoed louder than anything else: "Character is proven when no one's looking." Those words had shaped Charles in ways he hadn't fully appreciated until now. He realized that his mother had been teaching him about integrity long before he understood the real meaning of money or success. She had shown him that true worth isn't measured by wealth, but by the values you hold when the spotlight is off. For years, Charles had pushed those memories aside, busy chasing his dreams and building his empire. He had forgotten the humble roots and lessons that defined his mother's life. But Maria, with her silent actions, her refusal to take what wasn't hers, had pulled those memories back to the surface. She reminded him of something he needed to hear, even if he hadn't known it yet. Charles thought about how his mother's sacrifices had shaped him, and how Maria's struggles echoed that same story. Both women, though worlds apart, embodied strength and dignity in the face of hardship. It was a powerful connection, one that made Charles see Maria not just as an employee, but as a reflection of the values his own family had tried to instill in him. He felt a mix of pride and humility wash over him. Pride in the lessons his mother had passed down, and humility in realizing how far he'd drifted from those lessons. Maria's story was a wake-up call, a reminder that character isn't just a word. It's a living, breathing force that guides how we treat others, especially when no one else is watching. That night, Charles promised himself he would pay more attention to the quiet moments, to the actions that revealed true loyalty and respect. He understood now that trust wasn't just about guarding money or possessions. It was about honoring the human spirit behind every gesture. Maria's integrity had opened a door back to his own past and values. As he lay awake, memories of his mother's steady hands and unwavering faith lingered. He asked himself if he was ready to face the parts of his own story he had avoided. Could he embrace the lessons of honesty and humility that Maria had brought into his life? The answer wasn't clear yet, but Charles knew this was only the beginning of a deeper transformation. With a new sense of purpose, Charles prepared to take the next step in his journey with Maria. The past and present were converging, and the real test of trust was yet to come. What would happen when he confronted the truth about loyalty, honesty, and second chances? Only time would tell. The next day arrived with a heavy sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Charles knew this was it, the final test. He carefully placed an envelope inside the open safe, a simple manila folder containing $1,000 in cash and a handwritten note that said, "Take what you need." His hands trembled slightly as he set the camera rolling. Every beat of his heart seemed to echo louder than the last, filling the silent room with a tension that was almost unbearable. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust and understanding. As the day unfolded, Charles watched the footage obsessively. He saw Maria go about her usual tasks, folding clothes, sweeping floors, cleaning with quiet efficiency. The safe was there, an open invitation, but would she finally break? Would the weight of her struggles push her to take just a little? The envelope sat inside, the cash a tempting lifeline for anyone facing the kinds of challenges Maria had. For Charles, this was more than a test of honesty. It was a test of character, heart, and loyalty. He thought about the power behind those few words on the note. Take what you need. It was an offer born of empathy and respect, not suspicion or judgment. Charles wanted Maria to feel seen, to know that her hardships mattered, and that he was willing to help without strings attached. Sometimes it's easy to offer help but hard to truly trust. This note was a bridge, a silent acknowledgement that he understood her fight and was ready to stand beside her, no matter what. The camera captured every moment, every hesitation, every glance toward the safe. Charles could almost feel Maria's inner battle playing out in real time. Would she risk taking the money and exposing herself to judgment? Or would she hold fast to the integrity that had defined her from the start? The tension was palpable, a silent war between need and honor. This test wasn't about catching her in a lie or proving a point. It was about giving her permission to accept help, something many people struggle to do, especially those proud enough to guard their dignity fiercely. Charles admired that pride, knowing it came from a place of deep respect for oneself, even when life seemed unfair. The $1,000 wasn't just cash. It was a symbol of a second chance, a gesture of trust that few get to receive. Watching the footage, Charles reflected on how often people reject help because accepting it feels like admitting weakness. Maria's story was a reminder that true strength lies in vulnerability, in allowing others to support you without shame. It was a lesson that applied to all of us, no matter our circumstances. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to say, "I need help." As the day went on, Charles held his breath, waiting for the moment of truth. The safe remained open, the envelope untouched, or so it seemed. The camera captured every detail, but the real question was what would happen when the day ended and the choice was made. Would Maria take the money, or would her loyalty and integrity hold firm? This final test was more than just a challenge for Maria. It was a turning point for Charles too. A chance to truly understand what it means to trust someone, to see beyond suspicion, and to embrace the humanity in all of us. The answer lay just ahead, waiting to be revealed. When Maria finally opened the safe that day, Charles held his breath, watching every move through the camera's lens. She reached inside and took out the envelope. For a moment, it seemed like she might take the cash inside, the $1,000 that could have changed everything for her and her son. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of grabbing the money, she carefully folded a small bill and slipped it into the envelope. It was a $5 bill, worn and familiar. Not a fortune, but a meaningful gesture. Charles's heart skipped a beat as he saw Maria close the safe quietly, the door clicking shut like a secret locked away. That small folded bill was a mystery in itself. Where did it come from? In a place surrounded by wealth, this tiny act felt like a whisper of something deeper, a symbol of respect, responsibility, and an unspoken code between two people who didn't speak much but understood everything. It was a moment that challenged everything Charles thought he knew about loyalty and honesty. Adding money instead of taking it was not just an act of integrity. It was a silent message. Maria wasn't there to take what wasn't hers. She was there to honor the trust placed in her and to acknowledge that even small debts, like the price of a child's snack or a moment of kindness, matter. That $5 bill wasn't just cash. It was a token of gratitude, responsibility, and a subtle reminder of the humanity behind every decision. Charles realized that this gesture said more about Maria than any words ever could. In a world where money often dictates relationships, she was saying, "I'm not just your maid. I'm a person with my own struggles, my own dignity, and my own sense of honor." That unexpected move reshaped the way he saw her, from a figure in the background to a person who deserved respect and trust beyond her job title. This small act of adding to the safe also made Charles think about the power of reciprocity in human connections. Sometimes the greatest gifts come not from grand gestures, but from the simple, thoughtful acts that show respect and care. Maria's $5 bill was a lesson in humility and grace, a reminder that integrity can survive even in the harshest circumstances. Charles's mind raced, trying to piece together the story behind that $5 bill. Was it something Maria owed him? Or was it a way to give back in the only way she could? The answer wasn't clear yet, but the gesture spoke louder than explanations. It was a secret between them, a bond built on trust, loyalty, and unspoken respect. As the camera stopped recording, Charles felt a mixture of admiration and wonder. This moment was a turning point, a revelation that trust is a two-way street. Maria had passed every test he set, not by taking what was offered, but by adding her own value to the equation. It was a powerful reminder that character isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it. That day, Charles learned a lesson he wouldn't forget. Sometimes, the smallest actions carry the biggest meaning. And sometimes, the people we least expect teach us the most profound truths about honesty and loyalty. Maria's unexpected move was proof that dignity can shine even in the quietest, simplest moments. The question now was clear. Where did that $5 bill come from? The answer held the key to the next chapter in their story, one that would reveal even deeper truths about trust, sacrifice, and second chances. Later that night, Charles called Maria into his study. The day's events had left him with more questions than answers, and that $5 bill was weighing heavily on his mind. As she entered the room, he looked into her eyes and asked quietly, "What's the story with the $5? Maria paused, her gaze steady and unflinching, then answered with simple honesty, "It's what I owe for my son's snack. He spilled it on your carpet last week." The truth was humbling in its simplicity and power. That small confession held more weight than any large sum of money ever could. It revealed a woman who took responsibility for her actions, even when life was already demanding everything she had. Maria's integrity wasn't just about refusing to take what wasn't hers. It was about owning her mistakes, facing consequences, and still choosing honesty. This was the kind of character that's rare to find, especially when poverty presses hard on your back. Charles felt a deep respect growing inside him. Here was a person barely scraping by, weighed down by life's hardships, yet refusing to let those challenges erode her sense of dignity. Many would have hidden the truth or blamed others, but Maria stood firm, embodying the lesson that honesty and accountability aren't luxuries. They're essential. It was a powerful reminder that integrity can survive even in the toughest circumstances. He thought about the countless times people in his position might have dismissed such small debts or brushed them aside. But Maria's approach was different. She wasn't asking for pity or charity. She was simply doing what was right, no matter how hard it was. This story was a lesson not just for Charles, but for everyone who struggles to balance survival with morality in a world that often demands compromises. The $5 became more than money. It symbolized a code of honor that Maria lived by every day. It showed that respect is earned not by wealth or status, but by the choices we make when no one's watching. Charles realized that his test hadn't just been about catching a thief. It had been about discovering a soul whose heart beat with honesty and loyalty. That night, Charles reflected on his own judgments and prejudices. How often had he assumed things based on appearances or circumstances? Maria's story challenged him to rethink what it truly means to trust someone, and how poverty doesn't automatically equate to dishonesty. It was a lesson in humility and humanity that struck deep. Charles felt compelled to offer more than just words after hearing Maria's truth. He knew this moment could be the start of something new, a chance to rewrite the narrative of struggle and dignity. But before he could make any promises, He needed to understand if Maria was ready to accept a second chance on her own terms. Their conversation ended not with a grand declaration, but with a quiet understanding. Maria's honesty had opened a door, but what lay beyond was still uncertain. Could integrity really survive poverty? That question hung in the air, waiting for the answer only time could provide. As the night grew darker, Charles sat alone with his thoughts, knowing that the next steps would test both their hearts and minds. The story was far from over, and the real transformation was just beginning. Charles stood there, words caught in his throat, overwhelmed by a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of humility that made him feel small despite his wealth. The power and control that money usually gave him seemed to fade in that moment, replaced by a deep respect for Maria's courage and integrity. He realized that this was no longer about business or suspicion. It was about offering something real, something that could change a life. Finally, he found his voice and said, "What if I offer you more than just a job?" He laid out an offer that went beyond a paycheck. A home where Maria and her son could find safety and stability, free from the worries that had haunted them for so long. A trust fund set up to secure her son's future, giving him opportunities Maria had only dreamed of, and most importantly, a second chance. A chance at peace, dignity, and respect. It was an offer born from the heart, one that recognized the value of loyalty and character beyond money. Maria's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time, she allowed herself to show the emotions she'd been holding back for so long. Her tears weren't just about relief or gratitude. They were the release of years of struggle, sacrifice, and silent endurance. It was a moment of transformation, where vulnerability met kindness, and two worlds collided in a way that neither had expected. Charles felt the weight of that moment deeply. He realized that true wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give. This offer was his way of honoring Maria's integrity and rewarding her honesty in the most meaningful way possible. It wasn't about charity. It was about recognizing the dignity and heart that had stayed strong through every test. He thought about how many people might have missed this chance, blinded by suspicion or prejudice. But Charles had learned that sometimes the real treasure isn't in the safe or the money. It's in the people who show up every day with loyalty and trust. Maria had passed every test, not by taking, but by giving everything she had: honesty, respect, and character. This moment was also a turning point for Charles himself. He understood that offering this second chance meant letting go of old doubts and embracing a new way of seeing others, not through the lens of suspicion, but through the lens of empathy and trust. It was a lesson in humility that money could never buy. Maria's acceptance wasn't immediate. The tears in her eyes spoke volumes, but the question hung in the air. Would she accept this new chapter? Would she allow herself to receive more than just a job? The answer was a mystery, filled with hope and uncertainty. As Charles waited for her response, he felt a quiet excitement mixed with vulnerability. This was more than a business decision. It was a human moment that could change both their lives forever. The safe had revealed more than valuables. It had uncovered a story of transformation, trust, and the power of a second chance. The question now was clear. Would Maria say yes? The answer would shape the next chapter of their journey, where respect, loyalty, and heart would guide the way forward. Maria looked Charles in the eyes and spoke with a quiet strength that caught him completely off guard. "All I ever wanted was to be seen, not saved." Those words landed like a thunderclap, cutting through the noise of wealth and power that usually filled the room. It was a simple statement, but it carried a depth of emotion and truth that money could never buy. For Maria, what mattered wasn't being rescued or handed things on a silver platter. It was being recognized as a person worthy of respect and dignity. Charles felt those words resonate inside him more than any balance in his bank account ever had. In that moment, he realized the entire test with the safe wasn't about guarding wealth or catching a thief. It was a mirror reflecting his own assumptions, fears, and the way he had viewed Maria, and perhaps others, too quickly. The safe, with all its contents, was a symbol, but what truly mattered was the character behind the actions. This realization shifted something deep inside Charles. He saw that trust is more than just about money or possessions. It's about seeing people fully, understanding their struggles, and honoring their integrity. Maria's reaction was a reminder that sometimes the richest treasures aren't material. They're emotional and human connections that transform both giver and receiver. Charles thought back to the silent moments he'd observed Maria, how she never touched the money, how she cared for the home, and how she took responsibility in ways he hadn't expected. Her tears, her quiet strength, her honesty. All of it painted a picture of someone deserving not just employment, but dignity and recognition. The safe had tested her loyalty, but Maria's true gift was her heart. He understood now that this experience was teaching him a powerful lesson about humility and empathy. Wealth can't buy respect, nor can it force someone to change. True transformation happens when we let go of suspicion and open ourselves to the humanity in others. Charles knew this lesson would stay with him far longer than any dollar amount ever could. Maria's words also made him reflect on his own life. How often had he mistaken money for value, or overlooked the importance of being truly seen? This encounter was a wake-up call, showing him that the real breakthrough isn't financial. It's personal. It's about connection, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. As Charles absorbed this new understanding, he felt a shift in his priorities. The safe was no longer a vault of riches, but a symbol of change, a reminder that sometimes what we guard the most isn't our money, but our hearts. Maria had shown him that trust and respect are the true keys to any fortune. The question lingered: what would Charles do with this lesson? Would he let it change how he lives, leads, and values the people around him? The answer was still unfolding, promising a new chapter in his life and theirs, one shaped by respect, integrity, and heartfelt connection. Weeks passed, and the safe that once held stacks of money, rare coins, and sparkling jewelry was now completely empty. Charles had carefully removed every valuable item, locking them away elsewhere, but there was one thing he refused to take out. Tucked in the corner of the safe was a photo. A simple, candid picture of Maria and her young son, smiling with a quiet kind of joy that no amount of money could buy. Beside the photo was a handwritten note that read, "This is what wealth looks like." That photo, more than any gem or cash, was a symbol of the true value Charles had discovered. It reminded him daily that real wealth isn't measured by material possessions but by the people we trust, the relationships we nurture, and the integrity we hold dear. Maria and her son represented hope, resilience, and a kind of richness that transcended any bank balance or safe deposit box. Charles often found himself staring at that photo late at night, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The safe had started as a test of suspicion but ended as a testament to loyalty and transformation. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the stories and hearts behind the surfaces we judge too quickly. He thought about how many times he had overlooked the quiet strength of people like Maria, focusing instead on the obvious signs of success and failure. This photo challenged those assumptions and inspired him to look deeper, to value character over currency. It was a lesson he vowed never to forget. For Maria, the photo represented more than a moment captured on film. It was proof that her honesty and dignity had been seen and cherished. It was a quiet victory that showed her son what it means to live with integrity, no matter the hardships faced. In their world, that kind of wealth was priceless. Charles knew that the note he left behind wasn't just a message for Maria. It was a reminder for himself and anyone who would hear their story. True wealth is not locked behind metal doors or counted in dollars. It lives in trust, respect, and the courage to give and receive without fear. The empty safe stood as a symbol of transformation, of lessons learned and bridges built. It wasn't just a container for valuables anymore. It was a monument to the power of second chances and the human heart's capacity for kindness. As Charles closed the door on that chapter of his life, he felt a sense of peace and gratitude. The safe had revealed more than gold or jewels. It had revealed the real treasure of life: connection, honesty, and love. And in that moment, Charles knew his richest days were still ahead. The story of the safe and the maid was far from just a test of money. It was a lesson in what truly matters. And sometimes that lesson is the most valuable treasure we will ever find. Sometimes the richest people walk into our lives wearing quiet shoes. They don't come with flashy signs or loud announcements. They come with hearts full of dignity and lessons waiting to be learned. Maria didn't take what wasn't hers. Instead, she gave something rare and precious: dignity. And Charles? He learned that trust isn't about being cautious or guarding every penny. True trust is about being open, vulnerable, and willing to believe in others. Because some people don't want your money, they just want to matter. If this story moved something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more real stories that remind us of who we really are, beyond the surface. And if someone has ever trusted you, honor that trust. Remember, you never really know what someone is carrying inside. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness and respect can change a life forever.